Welcome to NFL Daily, where we are not a Dolphin-safe show today. I'm Gregg Rosenthal. I'm home. I'm talking to my friend Jourdan Rodrigue, who's across the city, whose dad joke from text about an hour or two ago I just stole. Welcome back to NFL Daily, Jourdan. We missed it.
I'm happy to be here. You had a great week of shows in the gap between our fantastic and super fun Super Bowl recap. I loved hearing Mina, and I loved hearing Bill. I always love hearing Ollie. You know this. So it was fun. It was fun for me to kind of just sleep for the last 5 days and listen to everything.
No comment on your corny joke. I was gonna say listeners don't know how much Jourdan loves a dad joke, but they really do because they've been listening to you for a couple of years now, and we'll have more opportunities for said jokes because yes, we'll talk about Tyreek Hill and all the Dolphins being cut. We do have just kind of drips and drabs of news as we are in a flash flood warning in Los Angeles right now, and so if you hear anything in the background, that's the rain. And then we're gonna do a little primer on the franchise tag. It's an exercise I've done for a long time now on the podcast, and it gives us a chance of who we think is going to get tagged, who won't, and it gives us a chance to talk about some of the biggest names that are going to be on my top 101 free agents list, which is in process. I kind of have my rough draft ready, and now I got to decide where to put Tyreek Hill and Bradley Chubb, and maybe Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, and maybe James Daniels. I don't know if they're going to make the cut, but I'll let you go first here, Jourdan. The Dolphins' new front office made a lot of cuts, none of which were shocking, but they kind of are the first team to just make all these big moves. And Tyreek Hill specifically is a big name who is immediately available on the free agency market. If a team wanted to talk to him and potentially sign him in the next week, they could. Bradley Chubb, we'll see. It's not official yet, but just your thoughts on this overall group and what it means for the Dolphins.
Well, yeah, I think to your point, inevitable in some ways because John Eric Sullivan and Jeff Hafley, you knew immediately once they set up shop and sort of let the dust settle. Post Super Bowl is really when a lot of this stuff starts to formally happen, gearing up toward the combine, gearing up toward free agency starting in a couple of weeks. You knew that they were going to identity shift the team, right? This was a team that was built somewhat incongruently in some ways, but a lot of ways on offense especially had an identity that fit what Mike McDaniel wanted to do in terms of a lot of speed. Tyreek Hill coming off the injury, that's going to be an interesting one to watch, and all of the off the field stuff that he always seems to be involved in as well, and see how certain teams pick that up. But yeah, it's not a surprise to me to see this sort of mass exit of a lot of these players that we've known to be a core part of the roster for the last couple of years. And the big question at quarterback still remains. So we'll see what the Dolphins do over the next couple weeks there.
Yes, the insiders who have been reporting about this on Monday morning indicated that for now, they're not cutting Tua. I think they would like to get a trade partner. We talked about that on the trade candidate show with Bill Barnwell. I'm sure I'll be referring to that show a lot over the next couple of weeks. And the Dolphins would love to get a trade partner. The problem is they're going to have to give up something because Tua's contract is so onerous. They're going to have to give up, I think, picks with Tua just to get anyone to take his contract on and make it work financially. That would save them a lot of money, which they would love to do. I struggle to imagine a team's going to do that, but there are a few teams that just have a ton of cap space. You never know. Talking about cap space, all these moves, and let's go through them. Tyreek Hill, 5-time All-Pro, probably a future Hall of Famer, had great years in Miami. Bradley Chubb, who missed all of 2024 with an injury, but played fairly well in 23 and 25, maybe not, as big as his name is, but he did have production. And then James Daniels was the guy they gave $24 million to just last offseason. He only played 3 snaps for them. He had been healthy before. That's just bad luck. And now they're going to cut him. So they went from over $18 million over the cap, Jourdan, to $11 million under the cap. So just with these 4 moves, they are now, close to what you need to be for the offseason cap compliant. The problem is they have $56 million in dead cap just from these cuts. So next time you hear like your favorite quarterback or actually good player is overpaid, like oh, he gets too much money. Like teams are willing to put $56 million in dead cap for guys who won't even be on the roster. And they had to do that. They had to make, it right for all the decisions that Chris Greer had made poorly over the last few years. But that Tyreek Hill deal they just gave to him a couple of years ago seems insane now. That like they gave him another deal just 2 years ago. My question is, what should I do with Tyreek on the top 101? Because initially I kind of slot him in one place. Then I thought about it. He's coming off a dislocated knee
Yeah.
and a torn ACL, and the off-field stuff is, a major concern because even though he hasn't been suspended of late, the Dolphins were dealing with a lot of issues, and to me, he'd kind of be hands off right now.
Yeah, and you have to see too, because unfortunately, I don't know that a lot of teams are going to factor the latter part in as much as they would factor in the injury concerns. So
Mm,
you have to see how he returns from it. I could see him being like a late summer addition for a team that is looking for like a Stephon Diggs type of
mm,
addition, someone who could really infuse speed. Maybe even if he, like, let's say he comes back from the injury and he's lost a step or two, still one of the fastest players we've ever seen playing football. So, it's one of those things where I could see a team taking a flyer and trying to, especially if they think they're in a competitive space, adding, you know, uh, maybe a cheaper veteran, someone who can infuse speed and talent for the quarterback, especially if their quarterback, let's say they have a young guy, he's further along maybe than they thought he might be. I could definitely see this happening like late June. And it's interesting because
mm,
Greg, I think they have up to 36 million they can save just depending on some of the levers they can pull in these releases. So
mhm.
it's still a huge amount of dead money that they're incurring. And if they
Yes.
move from Tua, even more so. But the thing about this is that teams don't care about this as much anymore. They are so willing to take a massive hit in terms of dead cap in the short term and absorb almost as much as they can over 1 year of pain, try to
Mhm.
maximize draft capital in that year and try to build some new core of their roster in that year without spending a ton in free agency. And then almost like gives you an auto reset. It's like a windshield wiper. Now it's raining. I'm thinking of this. It's like a windshield wiper on your entire basically team build, and then you can start over again.
Yeah, it's very well put by you, and it's not that hard to do. And teams are totally more willing. And a lot of the best teams in the league have had tons of big dead cap hits over the last few years, including the Eagles do it basically year after year. Bradley Chubb is a guy who I initially slotted into like the 50s or so of my top 101. There's a lot of free agents that I like more than him because of his injury history and because of his age, but he's still a productive
Mhm.
player. And as I get closer to it, I might inch him up. I might be in a little harsh on him initially, but
Yeah,
yes,
because he's a pass rusher, Greg, and you're gonna a team that thinks they're one
there's a
pass rusher
million pass
away.
rushers though. Yeah,
Just,
there are a lot of them.
yeah,
Would you?
it's teams that think they're one. I mean, look at the Bills. They're
Yes,
willing to pick up any veteran pass rusher like with a pulse as long as he can get them to one extra game in the
yes.
postseason.
Like Joey Bosa, I do have ahead of Bradley Chubb. To me, he was a better player if you're thinking of similar types of players. Khalil Mack, I have ahead of Bradley Chubb, and then there's actually there's some younger, more intriguing players that are even a little higher. But Chubb will get signed and do plenty well. I'm not projecting who makes the most money. It's more like who I believe in the most. Derek Carr could potentially be on the list. He's interested in playing again for the right team on the Homegrown podcast with our colleague David Carr. I don't know if you've had a lot of quality time with David. Good guy. Um, he once helped us get Derek Carr, you know, to unblock us on the Around the NFL
I
podcast.
remember
That was
that.
exciting. The most interesting thing about the Derek Carr, you know, conversation is that he said he's already turned down some teams. We know the Colts last year, but he even indicated maybe this offseason, he's mentioned it that he'd only do it for like a Super Bowl team. And it does go to our friend Adam's point on our favorite team podcast, the Saints Block Party podcast, where he was like, this guy's just kind of like quitting out. Yeah, he doesn't want to be on the Saints. Mickey Loomis doesn't want him on the Saints. The Saints still control his rights. I don't know if there'd be much of a trade market for Derek Carr, but if he can find a right landing spot, maybe he will be playing in the NFL this year.
I mean, as long as we're making statements like this, Greg, I am also ready and willing to return to the market so long as
Ooh.
Pedro Pascal is available, you know? So
Well, but here's the thing. Derek could absolutely not only just get a job in the NFL,
you might have to
but
settle for less, Derek. That's all I'm saying.
okay, like yeah, if he wants to be on a Super Bowl contender as a starter, yeah, that's obviously not happening. If he wanted to be like his brother on a Super Bowl contender as a backup, I think that could happen. That would make sense. David Carr, as they always bring up on our NFL Network show, like two-time NFL champion or one-time NFL champion, I don't remember, Super Bowl champion as a backup to Eli. So that could happen. Just something to keep an eye on with the quarterback market. The Rams and Niners, two teams um, that could at least the Rams could be in the market for a backup. Maybe bring in Derek Carr to the Rams if Jimmy Garoppolo leaves. It was announced, while we were away a little bit, but I did want to hit it that they're going to be playing in Australia, which is intriguing, and it will be a Week 1 game, which is intriguing, and that it might be on the Wednesday before Week 1. I thought Labor Day would be fun, but it's being reported, and the reporting has changed, so you never know, that it'll be Wednesday or Thursday in Australia before the season. If it was Thursday, they would probably let the Seahawks kick the season off on Wednesday. I think in that scenario, it sounds like they're not going to do a double header, but will be the two games back to back. We might start the season in Australia. Have you started to push the Athletic to try to send you on that trip?
I'm
Yeah,
trying to think of pitches as to how I can make it there. I
good
was
stuff.
talking to our friends Will Gavin and Lori. I think his last name's pronounced Horsch, but there's probably a
Mm,
different accent to it because he's Australian. Does ESPN Australia out there? We were trying to come up with in Santa Clara. We were last week or 2 weeks ago. We were trying to come up with like ideas of how I could somehow get out there. I'm a big fan of Tim Tams, the candy. So
mm.
every
I
time
don't
I
think
see
that's gonna help.
Lori, Every time I see Lori, he brings me a couple of Tim Tams, and I'm like, "Man, I gotta get out there. I gotta figure out how to load up a suitcase with that stuff."
I can just hear the Seahawks fans now if Rams Niners starts the season like this is disrespectful to us. Calm down. That game will be on NBC. That'll be the big game. They'll pick a great matchup. That they have plenty of matchups out of the division that are fantastic. Oh, Chiefs are one of them. That's not going to be it because you're not going to take the risk of Patrick Mahomes. Maybe it'll be the Bears. That would be fun. They're on the schedule, the home schedule. Caleb Williams in Seattle for the home opener, but I think that'd be fun. And then they should play on Wednesday. Give them as much time as possible to kind of readjust coming back. Quickly, Trinidad Chambliss, the Ole Miss quarterback, finally uh, won his appeals and he will go back to school. That's just quick thing I wanted to mention because he probably was the QB3, maybe 4 in this class, was probably a day 2 pick. But the money's better in college. So he's staying in college. And now I'm going to rip through a ton of little coaching updates and we'll hit the Harbaugh story afterwards. But you tell me which one of these you want to hit on after I rip through them. Seahawks with some hires. They got their offensive coordinator. It's a surprising choice. Brian Fleury, the 49ers tight ends coach. So a creative choice there and a first time OC in a big spot for Seattle. Zach Orr, the former Raven, also is going to join that defensive staff. He used to be a coordinator. Also, Daniel Stern, who a lot of geeks like yourself love, kind of as the strategy dude in Baltimore. Interesting hires there for Seattle. The Browns have hired Mike Rutenberg as their defensive coordinator. Rutenberg was under Jeff Ulbrich in Atlanta last year and Raheem Morris. So that's an interesting hire, but another first time DC under first time NFL head coach Todd Monken. Clint Kubiak's staff in Las Vegas. He elevated a defensive line coach, Rob Leonard, as defensive coordinator. So another first timer. Mike McCoy is on that staff. Joe DeCamillis is back in the NFL for old heads as a special teams coach. He's a fun guy. And then your guy, Mike LaFleur, and by your guy, I just mean he worked for the Rams. He kept Nick Rallis as defensive coordinator, which was interesting. I thought Nick Rallis did a good job. So expect the creative defenses there to stay. Matt Schaub is his quarterback coach. When I see Matt Schaub's name, I'm just going to mention it on the show. And then John Fox is back in the NFL as part of a coaching staff that I got to say, I think Joe Brady has nailed. I'm giving you the choice to hit one of those. What is the most interesting of all those?
Well, I think it's Brian Fleury. in
Mm,
Seattle. It's interesting. They clearly wanted to keep the tenets of the Shanahan run scheme in Seattle, and Mike
mm,
McDonald, went through a lot of internal candidates before he settled on an external candidate. Prying him away from Kyle Shanahan is something you obviously can't stop at a certain point if it's a promotion, but it's going to be felt in that building. He is George Kittle's favorite coach outside of John Embry, who is in
mm.
Miami, of all time. George Kittle and I, we sat down in the summer for a story that I did for The Athletic, and he has lots of thoughts and opinions on the modern tight end coach and how sometimes it's kind of an extra spot, or it's like where a lot of like the social climbers or the guys who are not going to be on the staff for long are because they're going to get promoted into other positions. He had two coaches that he had a significant extreme level of respect for. One of them was Brian Fleury, the other was John Embry, and he also kind of looks like George Kittle 50 years from now. I'm not saying he's that old, but they kind of look like they're related to each other in some way. My other thought, and I know you're only giving me one, but my other
Uh-oh.
thought was Mike LaFleur is clearly trying to do what Matt LaFleur has done with Sean Mannion, which is bring a quarterback in, a former quarterback that he knows really well, in to help coach his offense or help coach up his next quarterback. And the last thought, Greg, do you think that Mike Rutenberg calls his defensive playbook the Rutenberg Bible?
Oh, I that goes over my head. Like, oh, like I'm not a religious guy, you know? Gutenberg?
Daniel Jeremiah is gonna love that one.
He will. I thought you were gonna do like a rootin' tootin' joke or something
Wow,
to
you
that
think
effect.
so little of me, Greg.
Brian Fleury, it hits me, was there with Sam Darnold in San Francisco.
Yes.
Not that he was coaching him directly, but he was in a tight ends coach there at the
Yeah,
time.
I think
So
this is a
it's all
really
just
run.
so incestuous. The whole division is preposterous, and that's why I don't like the Mike LaFleur hire, because we need to just break out of this vicious cycle. And once again, the Cardinals are like at the bottom of the barrel in terms of their choices. But hopefully, Mike LaFleur won't be like that. But yeah, a lot of names we'll be talking about throughout the course of the season. You wanted to talk a little bit about the John Harbaugh article by Ian O'Connor, who for The Athletic
Mhm.
seems to be the official John Harbaugh whisperer
There's
slash.
gotta be a book coming. Like, I have to think.
Right.
I can't wait to read it. If
It's a little
so,
much, but it's
yeah.
also very good reporting and it's good. And we know how John Harbaugh, with all respect to Ian O'Connor, who's doing an amazing job, and I'm obviously is considering multiple things here, but like we're kind of seeing John Harbaugh's vision through Ian, and he's reporting that. And part of the article was just about the structure. Maybe the most interesting thing here is that their new hire, Don Aponte, who used to work for the Dolphins and then has been in the league office for a long time, is above Joe Shane on the depth chart. That everyone is reporting to Don Aponte, who then reports to John Harbaugh. So there's like another layer removed where Joe Shane is just scouting, and that's it. At least that's the most interesting to me. What hit you?
Yeah, that was the most interesting part to me, and I think that, and just from like a nuts and bolts standpoint, because I know you and I like to talk about reporting a lot too. Whereas, like, I think he's doing it in a really smart way. And I'm not just saying that because we're colleagues. I look up to him enormously, but like, I think he's going about it in a really smart way. Where there's like been a lot of like stuff and nonsense put out there by certain team officials talking about a unilateral decision making and all this stuff, and it's making it clear that not only is that not the case, but John Harbaugh seems to be the one that's making it clear that that's not the case here a few weeks later. And it goes to show to me how much, first of all, anyone with a pulse could have seen and known immediately. I don't think anybody believed this group when they said, like, oh no, we're going to hold the helmet equally and all that. Like, I don't think they believed that for 1 second. But they still kind of kept force feeding that into the narrative from the organization. And it goes to show, like, first of all, yes, John Harbaugh is very much in charge. I think that if you're going to have an overhang GM with a shaky track record, this is exactly the way you need to do it. You have to acquiesce control. If you're going to hire somebody who has such a resume as John Harbaugh does and such a vision for what he specifically wants, and you're going to keep the old GM, the GM quite naturally has to acquiesce power and control. But what the other side of this is how much, so much of these hiring cycles, Greg, are titled and like sort of coordinated to protect the ego of men who are worrying about that versus building a team. So I just feel like we get some of these like peeks behind the curtain when this like aftershock reporting comes out, which is what this is,
Yeah.
the first 30 days, and it's making a statement, a statement that was sort of pushed aside or quelled or tried to quell for the sake of ego, like very, very clear and obvious, the way that we all thought that it was.
Right. And a cynic, or at least maybe a realist, would say like the ego of John Harbaugh is a big part of this too, in that
Yeah,
half the
exactly.
article is like how hard he's working. He has not had time to even go to, and I'm sure it's all true, but it's given us his 4 a.m. workout routine, which I love that stuff. But it's one of those articles that if it doesn't go well in New York, you'll look back and be like, like he's feeling himself here, and I would too if I just signed a $100 million contract. And yeah, the whole
Well, I think
building is
it's
basically reporting to Donna Ponte.
who is reporting to John Harbaugh.
Right.
And it's interesting because I think those types of details paint a picture of somebody who wants people to know he's still got this. You
Of
know,
course.
like I still am capable. I still am, even though it was maybe not as mutual parting from the Ravens as I'd like people to think that it was, or they'd like people to think that it was. Like I'm in control, and this is why it will work that I am in
I got
control.
the
That's
juice and
what's
I got the
yeah,
muscles.
yeah.
All right,
That's
let's
what
take a quick break and let's come back and let's talk tag before we get out of here. So we're gonna go through like the top potential guys who could get the franchise tag this offseason. Just back on NFL Daily, feeling bad. I wasn't totally sure what the Gutenberg Bible was. Like it sounded vaguely familiar, but to me, Gutenberg is more rightly known as Steve from the Police Academy series. That's I don't know if it's the most famous book, but yeah, I would say Book of Job. There's, I know a lot of other types of books, but not that one. Tag primer. Let's do it. I set up our players into different sections, and yes, I was raised completely without religion and clueless. My kids are going to be even more clueless, which I worry about. I set it into different sections, Jourdan. The first section, and we'll just go through them, is a lock. I only have one that's a lock. It's already been reported. It's George Pickens. I think the most interesting thing to think about George Pickens right now is could they tag and trade him? And if so, what would the price be? The wide receiver tag is 28 million, 28.8. So a nice come up for George Pickens considering where he was last year. It's not like the Steelers dumped him, but that was, they were getting mid-round picks for him, and now he's getting 28 million at least. Cowboys have a lot of cap issues. I tend to think they will just tag and keep him. But what do you think the market would be if they kind of opened it up for offers?
Well, I mean, I think you're looking at least a second round pick, like maybe a couple of mid round picks for a George Pickens, who you're going to need to pay if you're an acquiring team. So you have to
Hmm.
factor that in as well. He's such a talent, and so that's part of the reason why I can't see the Cowboys parting with him outside of one extremely notable exception last offseason. A lot of times they've done a pretty decent job of like keeping their players who are their good players essentially. Outside of the Micah Parsons
Too many of
situation.
them, some Cowboys fans would argue. They've
Yes.
given some big contracts to not even great players. Yeah.
Yes, and so I think that that's a factor here. What we absolutely can't rule out is the fact that Jerry Jones is going to want this in the media for as long as possible into the spring and summer. So I'm sure we're going to hear and you know what? Like the wild card here, and I know you talked about it, I think with DJ on a previous show, is David Mulugeta being George Pickens' agent, also
Mm.
Micah Parsons' agent, also somebody who Jerry Jones insulted last offseason, ahead of even the negotiation process with Micah Parsons, and you try to think, okay, well, that can't possibly play a factor in people doing their jobs and executing. But if there is going to be straws that are maybe grasped out of reasons to not sign a player that they want to use, that an owner with a history of sort of holding on to these types of things wants to use, that could be one of them. It certainly would be the stuff of the type of noise that they want to perpetuate about their brand into the offseason. I think the smart thing to do would be to tag him and keep him. But again, George Pickens and David Mulgeta will probably have some sort of conversation or say about this too.
They're $30 million over the cap. They can do a million restructures, and obviously they can figure it out. But if you tag a guy, that's just a clean $28 million. I hate the franchise tag. I think they should get rid of it in the next CBA. It's so hard for these guys to earn like their right. There is no free market in the NFL, but closer to what free market value would be. That it seems like unfairly weighted against the players. That said, since it does exist, this is a situation where if I'm the Cowboys, I would not want to give George Pickens a long-term deal because of the up and down nature of his career. I think 1 year is perfect. And if you did have a team willing to give up a second plus, I don't think it's crazy to trade him at all, because I don't think paying him and CeeDee Lamb, like between them $60 million long term, is maybe that big of a winning strategy. But most likely you kick the can down the corner, because I don't think teams are going to give up much for George Pickens, to be honest, when you have to pay him that much money.
Yeah, if it's the contract aside, which we can't logically put it aside because it's going to be something
You're
that
going to have to pay him
you're
what,
going to have to
$100
pay
million
him.
guaranteed. So do you want to do that plus picks for George Pickens? I don't think many teams will,
Yeah,
unless the picks aren't great.
so that's why I would think the Cowboys have some leverage there. But looking at some of the rest of these names, and then also the names on the free agency list, there are going to be teams who miss out on getting their number one receiver
Hmm.
again, perhaps. Like teams that have struggled to nail this position over the course of the last couple of years. There are going to be teams that are maybe not wanting to take a risk on Tyreek Hill because of the injury stuff, because of the off the field stuff, and maybe the contract becomes a little bit more palatable in that case. If you think, okay, we can bring this guy in, and he's going to be our difference maker, and we think we have the right program for him as well.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun. I like
Because
I
you're not
like
getting
having.
Alec Pierce, you know, you're not getting
Probably not.
some of these
You
guys
might.
on here. You just some of these potential tag guys. What a segue! I know.
Very good. Well, yeah, and we talked AJ Brown, Brian Thomas Jr., that there will be
Yeah,
Michael Pittman, potentially receivers available for a trade. But these are more about tags. And yes, your segue. The section I categorize leaning yes. So if I had to guess, I think these players would get tagged. And I have 5 players in this tier. Alec Pierce, I think will happen. We'll start with him. Breece Hall, I think will get tagged. Odafe Owe maybe should have been more in my 50-50 tier now that I say it out loud. But if I would go like 52-48, I'm leaning. Kenneth Walker, I'm leaning yes. And Kyle Pitts, I'm leaning yes. So we'll go through them one by one. But Pierce and Daniel Jones is the most interesting situation, I think, on this entire list, because they're both free agents. They're both eligible for the franchise tag. A franchise tag for Daniel Jones would be $47 million, which seems prohibitive. So you would just think that they're going to have to figure out some sort of contract if they want to keep him. And that's partly why I do lean yes, that $28 million is a lot for Alec Pierce. But as you know, but just to remind the listeners, it's very often a tool to get them to a long-term contract extension. And a lot of times the contract happens before you even need the tag, and it's just kind of sitting in the background as something almost threatened by the team. And eventually you just get that contract done. It sounds like you think he will stay, and you agree with me here. Maybe
I
not.
I think that Alec Pierce is more of a extension candidate, and Daniel Jones is more of the tag candidate here.
Mm,
Especially because Alec Pierce will be ultra tradable if you decide maybe you're going in a different direction, or a new coaching staff comes in, let's say after 2026, and they go. I can't imagine not wanting one of the most explosive players we've seen in the last couple of years in the NFL. But if they go in a different direction, like he would be, I think, tradable.
well,
Whereas
then if
the
by that logic, the guy who's trading him is fired. So I don't know if that
so
plays a huge role.
Okay, well, it's not like it doesn't play a huge. I'm just sort of contextualizing why I would
Right.
make the decision is you should extend your good players. If you have a good
Yes.
player in house, you should extend your good players. If you come to regret it, he is a very tradable asset. That's my
Mm,
only point in that parameter. The other thing is Daniel Jones, I think, is a more likely tag candidate for the Colts here. The injury is everything. It really is. And I think realistically, we've seen these Achilles recoveries where you do really have to get a sense for how a guy can come back that first year. And it really looks unsteady that first year back, as miraculous as the recovery surgeries and the recovery time has gotten. It still is such a significant recovery timeline that we've seen guys sort of creak back into their better selves a year after the surgery, or it just takes time. So I think you wanna keep them in-house and monitor how the recovery is going, but you don't wanna necessarily commit to anything long term until you can see what that timeline actually
mm.
looks like. And to your point, sometimes the tag can be an on-ramp to an extension, and it's still a significant amount of guaranteed money for a quarterback who really made your offense tick and look like the right fit for the head coach. So the Colts have so many prove it situations happening in 2026 infrastructurally that I just think tagging the quarterback is a
Mm.
smart idea.
I just think 47 is too much. It sounds easy for me on the outside. What are they going to do at quarterback if, he, you know, stares them down, but I and doesn't take whatever they're offering. But to me, there has to be, to me, if he signs a contract, it's going to be like a 2-year contract, and it's not going to be for top money, and it might be backloaded. It's really complicated. And that's why I think they have to consider all options, including not bringing Daniel Jones back if push came to shove. Because putting $47 million on your cap for a guy who, best case scenario, is going to play half this year and probably won't be as good as he was before is really tricky. So since there's a lot of mutual interest, can you just figure out some sort of compromise that spreads it out? It's a couple years, whatever the contract is. We'll see, but it's fascinating. I'm not totally convinced it's like 100% he's back, even though it's very likely.
Greg, I think that because Daniel Jones played last year's situation so smartly,
Mhm,
where Minnesota was clearly interested, probably will be again, frankly. Minnesota was clearly interested in him, and there were people in that building that wanted to keep him, and he went to a place that was better for him in the long
mhm,
run. I just don't think that we can automatically assume he would say, "Okay, yeah, let's compromise and take 2 years of, like, something that's easy on your cap." Like, this is a player who knows he can do the job, and, so it would be a leap of faith for the Colts saying 1 year, 47 million, but maybe you make it up on the back end if it works out and you do some more amenable things after the 2026 season. I just think that 47 million is not going to look like a lot in
mm.
retrospect in a best case scenario if the quarterback ends up working out long term and you can get something good worked out with him.
It's so complicated because if you're Daniel Jones, how I would think about it is like this. I mean, this year's probably not going to go like why would his value might go down? It should go down. The odds on him playing
I'd want the
80% as
tag if
well
I were
as
Daniel Jones.
what? Yeah,
I'd
you
want the tag.
take that guaranteed money, but
Yeah.
it's very tricky if you can get more guaranteed money in a multi-year and then not rush yourself and not feel like the pressure to like earn your market value back in a year. And I was talking about this with someone this morning too, that yeah, like I think we forget that like he's had in a lot of injuries, and like counting on him to be great this next year is tricky. And so they got
You're
to figure out, is Riley Leonard enough? There's a lot to figure out.
you're kinda arguing against your own Colts point then. I know you said if you're Daniel Jones, you think about it this way, but your argument for the Colts, like, you don't wanna put up that much guaranteed money. Okay, well, a long-term extension is more guaranteed money than 47 million, and I know it's a year
Right.
versus multiple years, but if you know that you need him in your building to understand how his recovery is going. The second he leaves your building, you no longer have access to that data. You don't have any of that information. So it's like, it's kind of a if you think he could be your long-term solution, maybe you use it as a tool to get to something else is what I would say.
Yeah, mine is even less maybe about the guaranteed money long term and more just literally just building the team this year in a win now type of year that okay, that just goes on the cap. But you can always figure it out, including maybe with a Pittman trade. Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker, I put leaning yes. Not too complicated there. The running back number is just very low to me, 14.5 million. I mean, it's a lot to pay a running back 1 year, It just feels like that's one less problem for either of these teams to solve. The Jets should not be in the business of just letting good players walk away. So those seem simple to me, but I guess we'll see with Kenneth Walker. What do you think?
I think Kenneth Walker is a no-brainer to me. The Breece Hall one I think is a little more complicated just because the Jets are in badly need of like a vibes improvement. It's very clear Aaron Glenn is trying to reset in a lot of ways in that building, and some of it's job saving mode, I think, but some of it's also getting the a little bit of a tonal reset. And Breece Hall gave strong indications on social media and in interviews, etc., that he wanted out with all those other guys at the trade deadline. Things can always change, but if I'm the Jets, yes, the tag is really enticing. I'm also thinking about, does this guy actually want to be here? So to me, that's the first question that needs to get answered, especially if you're trying to go for, like I said, a little bit of a tonal reset this year.
Yeah, the only problem for the Jets with that is if that was their barometer, they wouldn't have a team or maybe even a coaching staff. Nobody wants to be there. Adafe Owe, what a contract year he had. $27.3 million in terms of the franchise tag. He's in my top 10. I kind of went back and forth between him and Boye Mafe as my two favorite edge guys, top 10 players overall. And just think they value that position so much
Mhm.
that it took me a second to get there, but I thought, I don't know. I just think one way or another, it's like almost with all these guys, a long term extension is more likely than not than a tag. But I just don't think they'll let them walk away. They can figure out the money later.
Yeah, I think he's on this list, the probably the strongest extension candidate, other than Alec Pierce. But yeah, defensively, I think he's. I mean, to me, you saw how productive they were once he got there. He brings a lot of that system to life up front. Yeah, I think he's an extension candidate.
It's weird because he was in the same system in Baltimore and was generally, I wouldn't say
But he didn't have the same
disappointing.
rushing partners, Greg. That's
Yeah,
what it's that's there's a lot to that that I think goes overlooked and kind of maybe blamed on coaching too at times. It's like you need good rushing partners too. You have to have chemistry with those guys and a plan, a mathematical plan built around what everybody's strengths are.
and Tuli Pelotu is due a long-term contract extension, so they have to think about their money. Khalil Mack is also a free agent. So now that I'm talking it out, I feel like he could be in the next category up in the air because there is a scenario where they give Tuli the money, they just bring back Khalil Mack, if, assuming he wants to play for 1 year. But we'll see. I lean yes in the end. Kyle Pitts, man, I've talked too much about Kyle Pitts on this podcast here. The tight end number is ultimately 16.3 million. And I do think kind of like George Pickens, he's a good candidate for a tag because he's had an up and down career. In Pitts' case, he's had these injuries, and for a 1 year contract, it's kind of perfect for the Falcons to keep an offensive weapon, test drive him with a new staff and see if he fits with them. That seems pretty
This will be his fourth test drive, third test drive.
right.
Trying to go through the math in my head. It's
And
gonna
he
be
fit
the
well with Zach
year.
Robinson. It was probably the best thing going
Yeah,
for Zach Robinson. He,
right.
he maxed out Pitts. Up in the air, I had Daniel Jones there before. We talked about him. Jalen Phillips would have that same $28 million number at edge. Man, I don't think the Eagles are going to want to let him go. And then Kate Otten, I threw in there at tight end for $16 million because the Bucks are not really in the business of letting their young guys just walk away, and they have a few different options with which they could use the tag, including Jamel Dean. I think Otten would be the most likely, not guaranteed, because the tricky part is if the tag is 16 million, you're trying to get a contract done probably averaging, let's say, 12 million. And
Mhm.
so it's this bargaining chip that the players have. So again, a long-term deal I think is more likely for both those players, but both Phillips and Otten I think have a chance.
Yeah, and you just mentioned it. Zach Robinson's the OC down there now. Is gonna need a number 1 tight end in this offense. Baker Mayfield loves Cade Otton. I think we all were a little disappointed. Cade Otton showed extraordinary promise 2 years ago and even, flashed a little at the start of this season too. And then kinda disappeared a little bit, like, just kinda wasn't everything in that offense was disjointed, but I think if you're Zach Robinson, you're like, "Is this gonna be my number 1 tight end?" because you need one. The player, the hinge player, a lot of times in that offense is that guy. So can Kate Otten be that guy?
Yeah, unlike Kyle Pitts, I think he's a guy who that you're gonna feel good about in terms of asking him to block. Pitts is almost just like a big receiver and has value doing that. Jalen Phillips, if he does make it to free agency, in which I always root for that because I want my list to look as good as possible, is my number 3 player overall. I have Pickens number 1, I have Tyler Linderbaum number 2, and I have Jalen Phillips number 3. I don't think the Eagles will let him go, but it's complicated. They have so much going on this offseason.
I
It's
know.
really insane and it's really fascinating. But I think they have a great young player at a position they really value in the building, so they tend to keep those guys. I'm leaning no on the 2 Chiefs players, Brian Cook, the safety, who might be the top safety available, and Jalen Watson, who might be the top cornerback available, because in general, they've just let their defensive backs go. But the safety number isn't that big. It's getting bigger, though. It's $20.8 million. That would be a lot for a team that is trying to figure out how they're going to get under the cap. And then I have a long list of guys I'll just say no to, and feel free to talk about any of them. The Ravens, Isaiah Likely, Tyler Linderbaum, Zion Johnson, as I did this exercise, kept climbing up my top 101 list. I still don't think that they would tag him, but man, Jim Harbaugh loves him, and he's probably their best interior offensive lineman, and they're terrible on the interior. So I say no, but it's not crazy. Devin Lloyd and Travis Etienne, I just don't think it makes sense for the numbers, even though they're really good players. They're going to be in my top 20 players overall. Devin Lloyd's in the top 10. Devin Bush had a great season for the Browns, but that's a no. Kenny Gainwell, if you're the team MVP, I'm just going to mention you at least. Rasheed Walker and Quay Walker both play for the Packers. Rasheed plays left tackle. Quay plays linebacker. I don't think they would tag those guys, but they're intriguing guys coming off their rookie contracts. Alontae Taylor for the Saints at cornerback. Cam Curl at safety for the Rams. I threw in Kobe Bryant. He would get X'd out there by Kenneth Walker in this scenario. The Seahawks safety probably wouldn't pay him $20 million anyway. So those are just some of the names I did not give my franchise tag to. But teams can do it soon. The offseason is starting right now, Jourdan. Who stands out to you out of that list?
Actually, what stands out, well, I didn't mean to actually, but what stands
Mm,
out to me about this list overall is I agree with all of these. I mean, and
mm,
you're looking at teams that don't that will are usually pretty smart about not using the franchise tag if they can help it, or if there's another financial balance to be earned in another area. Um, I'm looking at Devin Lloyd, who had a great year. Could be an extension candidate for that reason, whereas a year ago he certainly was not. But if James Gladstone operates at all like Les Snead, which he has so far, like they are going to stay as far away from the franchise tag as they possibly can.
hmm
And same goes for a couple of these guys where you just can't see it financially working out. Mark Andrews, I think he's at what 13 million per year,
hmm
Greg. So there's no way that they would also tag Isaiah Likely and double up that much money at their tight end position. As much as the position has grown over the last couple of years and how significant it's become in these offenses, it's just not financially something they need to do with all these players who are coming up who can contribute early as like a number 2 or 3 tight end.
Yeah, I'll be interested if the tight end market finally corrects itself, because it does feel like for their value, they are dramatically underpaid right now. And Devin Lloyd could be an example for the linebackers. And yes, the linebackers get stuck when it comes to franchise tag with a really huge number. It's 28.1 million because they count TJ Watt as a linebacker. So they basically all get thrown in together. So that's good. That means more players ultimately won't get tagged and will just get to the free agent market. I don't mind
The
that it's
regular
kind of
season.
stupid. It is the regular season. Let's
Yay!
go. All right, we did it. We didn't get it under 40 minutes, but we did it, Jourdan. And
Every time you tell me we're going to do it in this amount of time, I always just laugh at you because I'm like, it's us. We're never going to do that.
we will be back later this week, 40s and free agents on Tuesday, and then we're going to go around all 32 teams. Jourdan and myself and Patrick Claybon, AFC, NFC, coming up later this week. We will see you then. Regular season, it's back.